Hello and welcome everybody to the museum's YouTube channel. Thanks for being here. For today's program, I'm your host, Chris Smith. You've probably seen me around here on this YouTube channel before, but it's great to be with you this Friday afternoon for a very special program. We've got an exciting one for you, a topic that I actually enjoy talking a lot about and enjoy learning a lot about, and one that the museum, situated right here in downtown Raleigh, thinks about a lot and is interested in as well. Today, we're going to be talking about climate change, but not just climate change. The way that climate change, we think, will impact us right here in the state of North Carolina, the way that it could impact folks living right here in Raleigh. We'll be talking with a couple of experts today. So one expert who knows a lot about the change in climate, especially for us right here in North Carolina, what's changing and what we can anticipate in the future. And we'll be learning a little bit about what the city of Raleigh and the folks with Raleigh Stormwater, how they're thinking about some of these changes and how they're helping people who live right here in the city plan for the future. So it's going to be a great conversation today. I hope that you'll stick around for the whole thing. And as we go through the program, make sure that you give us your thoughts and comments as well. As we go through the program, I want to hear your thoughts. So drop them in the chat, whether it's on YouTube or whether you're watching us over on Facebook. Leave those in the comments as we go along. And then once we get through our conversation, I'm going to look there for your questions. So it's an interactive program. Everybody gets to participate, but make sure that you're in the chat watching and tuning in. So also, and hey, I'll say this too, if you're enjoying the conversation, go ahead and text the link to somebody so that they jump in and share as well, or tweet it out real quick. We're at Natural Sciences on Twitter, by the way. That's a good thing to know. Let me introduce today's guest for our program. First off, I want you to meet Kathy Dello. Kathy is the director for the North Carolina State Climate Office and is our official state climatologist. Kathy, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
It's good to see you again and chat with you. We chatted, a couple of years ago, I think, and we learned a little bit about climate in North Carolina. I'm excited to hear some updates.
Yeah, I've only been here 2 years, so it was within the last 2 years, but I think it was very early pandemic.
Indeed, indeed. And then everybody, after a chat with Kathy, we're going to hear from Ben Brown. Ben is the floodplain administrator for the city of Raleigh with Raleigh Stormwater. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Chris. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear about what the city of Raleigh is doing right now, thinking about things like flooding, especially since we are in hurricane season presently and can still anticipate some of those major impacts.
Yep, all the way till the end of November, we're still in hurricane season.
Yeah, I feel like maybe in my introduction, that was a point that I forgot to make, was that the reason that we're having this conversation about climate and storms and things like floodplains in the city of Raleigh is because, we're in hurricane season. And even though, the beach is a few hours away from us here in Raleigh, we still see those impacts on a regular basis. So, folks, I'll remind you one more time, jump into the chat, even just to say hi, let me know where you're watching from. I want to hear from you. So, Kathy, I want to start by chatting with you a little bit about the climate of North Carolina and the kind of work that you're doing at the State Climate Office as it relates to things like major storms, hurricanes, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so the climate of North Carolina is incredibly varied. And I think it's one of the reasons we all live here, because we've got the mountains on one side, the coast on the other, and everything in between. And right now, I think is the perfect climate. Summer is typically a little bit too hot for me. We have warm summers in North Carolina. For some of you, you're very acclimated and it's just June through August for you. For others, it can be very difficult. We also have really warm nights, and we're seeing those get warmer with climate change. So if we look back at this past summer, our nights were about 2 degrees Fahrenheit above average in North Carolina. So maybe you kept the AC on more frequently than you would, or you kick the duvet to the ground because it was just too hot at night. And then we get rain. So we get rain during hurricane season, obviously, but it's fairly distributed throughout the year. We get it in the winter too. So when we're outside of that May through November window, we're still seeing rain across the state. But then we go through periods of drought as well. It's been fairly dry in North Carolina these past few weeks after 2 pretty wet years. So we can look around the state and point to different aspects of the climate and just see how it varies across what is a very long state. And then at the State Climate Office, we're studying all aspects of that. So climate touches everything and everybody in the state. So all 10.5 million of us. And we work with planners, we work with engineers, we work with the city of Raleigh to help people understand their climate risk. So we do original research, we build decision support tools, we do outreach materials, we work with museums and K-12 schools. Really, truly anybody who has a climate concern, they can come knocking and we'll answer.
Well, maybe I can speak for everybody and say that I'm glad that we have a climate office in North Carolina that's thinking about these things.
Thank you, me too. I'm really proud of the work we do. We have an amazing team, and truly no day looks the same for me because of all those varied groups we work with.
So in your role, you're thinking about climate, you're thinking about the changes that we see happening across the state. What are some of the anticipated ways that folks in North Carolina can expect things to change? Like, we already know climate change is real, climate change is happening, and it's going to impact everyone around the world, no matter where you are. We're seeing it in the news on a regular basis. But for folks here in the state, you know, kicking off their duvet covers because it's a little warmer than maybe it should be, what are some of those serious impacts that people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, and the impacts range from I'm uncomfortable at night to this is actually a really serious public health issue, because a lot of people in North Carolina lack sufficient access to cooling or can't afford to turn on their air conditioners. So it may be a really hot day that turns into a hot night and people just can't recover. We also have a lot of people working outside. We have a big agricultural economy. We have construction workers and landscapers, people who have outdoor jobs. So I get to sit in air conditioning all day, and I truly do whine about how hot it is, but there are people who have no choice but to work outside. So it causes the body a lot of stress when you're just in this cycle where you can't cool down. So big public health risk, but also our crops need a certain number of cool hours to actually develop well, especially our stone fruits like peaches. So when those aren't available, we see either diminished yields, or farmers have to think about different adaptation strategies. How do I cool down my crop so it can actually develop? So we have really, really big impacts and implications of climate change. And then speaking to a little bit more about this topic and what Ben works on, flooding is a huge concern across the entire state. So we can look at the coast. We obviously see impacts of sea level rise. We see flooding during nor'easters and hurricane events and other tropical events, but we see it across the entire state as well. So here in the Triangle, we see urban flooding, and I know Ben's going to talk a whole lot about that, so I won't steal his thunder. And then up in the mountains, we get really acute rainfall events, including one in Haywood County in August, which was a tropical depression. It was Hurricane Fran, but it passed over North Carolina as a depression. And that was flooding unlike they had seen in decades, and probably was the worst that they had ever experienced. So there are a number of fatalities with that. There were warnings that went out, but not everybody has a way to receive warnings, or warnings are in English, or warnings go to your smartphone and you don't have it with you at that time. So we have this really big communication gap as well. We have people like me who can talk about the impacts truly until 1 o'clock today, or for hours and hours and hours. But it doesn't mean anything if we're not getting it to the people in North Carolina who need to know a little bit more about it. So one of the things my office does is a lot of events like this to talk about the impacts, but also answer people's questions and try to figure out a way to help connect people with the reality that climate change is here and it's in our backyard, and it's just going to get worse in the coming decades.
So I want to apologize to folks who are letting me know in the chat. Our video, for some reason, keeps freezing. So they're catching us in about 5-second increments every 5 seconds. So I know our technicians are working on it. Mike is in the background. He's doing everything that he can, everybody. And unless I see a message to stop and restart, then we'll keep going with what we can.
So 5-second answers.
So yeah, we're just gonna rock and roll with it. So Kathy, when you're thinking about some of these impacts, you mentioned Hurricane Fran, you mentioned that becoming a tropical depression that dumped a lot of rain on part of the state. We're here today to talk about storms in North Carolina, and major storms in particular. How does climate change impact storms?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're heating up the planet, and a warmer atmosphere holds more water. It's something I learned back in one of my first college classes. And so we're supercharging the atmosphere with moisture, and it's got to go somewhere. We know how the water cycle works. And what it does is it results in more intense rainfall events. So we're seeing more intense hurricanes, meaning wetter hurricanes, but also more intense precipitation events, what I call the no-name events, that can drop 6, 7, 8 inches of rain like we saw in Johnston County last year.
How much rain again in Johnston County?
I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was a big flooding event.
Yeah. I mean, I think about storms like Ida that just came through and hit Louisiana, or Florence and Dorian that have come through and hit different parts of the Southeast in recent years. And I mean, these storms seem to be just bigger and stronger than folks are anticipating. They seem to continuously catch us off guard with how powerful they are.
Absolutely. Nashville got 17 inches of rain in 24 hours last month. Nobody was anticipating that. That's the sort of thing that you see in a forecast model and you think that can't be possible. But we've moved into a place where events that are off the charts literally are now possible, and they're happening in 2021.
Were these events, I mean, I don't know that meteorologists or climate forecasters would be able to anticipate, 17 inches of rain in Nashville, or, major flooding in Haywood County necessarily, looking at climate models. But it seems like we do have an understanding of what these impacts are, how they influence things like storms and hurricanes in particular. So how do climatologists doing work like you get the word out and raise awareness?
Yeah, so there's not a lack of facts or data out there. So this isn't an information deficit problem. We've written reports, and I've written a number of those reports myself. We have international reports down to local city reports and all sorts of academic papers. What we need to do is translate this into action and solutions. We can talk a lot about 6, 7, 8 inches of rain. Okay, what does that mean for Ben? What does Ben have to do? What does Ben need to prepare the city of Raleigh and deal with stormwater and deal with the urban flooding issues? It's a lot of connecting the science to policy and understanding the policy levers that we can pull, which doesn't always mean legislation. And small p policy means things that we're implementing on the ground, things that resource managers, floodplain managers, and water managers are working on. So making that connection, but also, 1 in 3 Americans have experienced a climate-fueled extreme weather event this year. That's huge. This is not something that we can run away from anymore. I came here from Oregon, and Portland hit 116 degrees Fahrenheit this summer. We can look around the country, we can look at Western drought, we can look across the globe and point to an event that maybe would have happened in the past, but climate change is making it more likely, and climate change is making it worse. We see the fingerprints of climate change on our weather across the entire state and across the entire planet.
might be a good time to bring Ben into the conversation then.
Yeah, I mean, just want to agree with everything that Kathy was saying, and a big piece too, Chris. Like in those storm events she's talking about, it's really how quickly all that rain falls. I mean, that's really what the systems are not. The existing infrastructure is not really designed to handle. Like 6-7 inches of rain over 3 or 4 days is a good thing. 6-7 inches of rain in 3 or 4 hours or less than that. I mean, that's where you get those extreme events and things like that. So that's what on a local level we're trying to wrap our mind around and get our citizens more educated and prepared for these types of events.
So Ben, in your role as a Raleigh floodplain administrator, what are you thinking about when you're thinking about major storms? Is it massive amounts of rainfall that happen all at once? Is it where are people? What information are you pulling in when you're thinking about these issues?
Yes, is that a good answer? No, really, we are trying to take a more holistic approach and also kind of a more educational approach, which is what Kathy alluded to as well, is that make sure our citizens know kind of where these flooding spots are likely to occur and get that information out there to them. The past few years, the city has been working on, as you can see behind me, these high water signs that we've been putting around our local roadways and areas that do have a tendency to flood. And these are automatic. Like once water gets to a certain level, they start flashing. And so it's nothing somebody's got to monitor or do like that. But we've also installed over 25 cameras. They're basically traffic cameras at major streams like in Raleigh, like in the past 2 years. So we can keep an eye on these areas and to know when they're going to flood and to know like when we need to make sure people are not going through these areas and roadways and things like that. And the big thing, the frustrating thing from a engineer's point of view, which is what my trade is not knowing something and not knowing what's going to happen. And hurricanes are not good by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have some lead time on hurricanes. It's these storms that drop like 6-7 inches that pop up in an afternoon during rush hour that really just take us by surprise. And that's what we're trying to work towards. In the past few years, Raleigh's been refining like what we call our flood early warning system, basically working with some meteorologists to predict when conditions are ripe for flooding like that and to give us that lead time of like 45 minutes to an hour. So we're not completely surprised by these extreme quick events. So, I mean, and getting that information out to the general public is really what we've been trying to focus on. I mean, we have large things to keep doing and large areas to improve upon, but really the education piece is really what we're trying to kind of focus on and get the information out there.
Well, I mean, I can probably speak for folks in and around Raleigh that I'm glad you're doing it. Yeah, for sure. So, I'm thinking about the impacts that Kathy was just talking about, and then thinking about, the high water sign that's behind you, and how much of the solution to this problem can be putting up high water signs everywhere, right? So it's like there's infrastructure and things like that, and doing things that are big, bright yellow so that people are made aware of them, because you need people to be safe right now. What does Raleigh Stormwater think about in planning for the future?
So this past spring, the Raleigh City Council actually passed ordinance change to kind of help us with that big P policy that Kathy was talking about, to just restrict the development of vacant land we've got in the 100-year floodplain, because that's our most sensitive area for obviously flooding, but also keep that area natural so it can function like a natural floodplain. And I mean, Raleigh's seeing a lot of development trends recently where we're seeing a lot of redevelopment, which some people like may may not like to see in their neighborhood a lot, but at least with the redevelopment, we can keep people safe because they're building to current Raleigh standards and things like that. And then if we can protect that vacant land to kind of serve as that natural floodplain and kind of keep that there, that's really a useful piece of that puzzle to kind of protect our citizens in future terms, because most people hear floodplain and they think it's automatically a bad thing, which I can totally see, because if you're in a floodplain and it floods, you don't want to see it. But a natural floodplain is actually exactly what a stream wants to do. And if you can give a stream a natural floodplain to kind of spread out in and keep buildings and people and roadways out of that, that'll actually help the entire ecosystem, because you'll be giving that water someplace to go that's not impacting people and things like that. So if you can keep that natural floodplain open, that's a really big piece of that planning. And we were really appreciative of the city council to kind of pass that ordinance last spring to kind of help us do part of that future planning as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's excellent to think about how these systems work naturally and how you can take advantage of them. And also, Raleigh is a rapidly growing city. There's development happening. I mean, like, I come to work downtown and I see cranes in the skyline all the time.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, we had a former director of planning that used to say, you can count like the number of cranes, and that's how you tell how well your city's doing as far as building, how many big cranes you got downtown. But yeah, I mean, those development pressures are real, and it's just a matter of dealing with that urban flooding, like we were referencing, is different because you've got people and products and businesses near this flooding. So you have to do the protection aspect, the education, and also kind of reserve these lands to kind of keep it from getting any worse.
So what's your job like then? Thinking about, what the city of Raleigh's, stormwater plan needs to be, or, plan for flooding needs to be in, just the next, tomorrow, if it's going to rain, versus looking, to 2050 or gosh, like climate reports that Kathy might be looking at, look at 2100.
Yep. No, it's very exciting, to say the least, as far as that goes. But planning for the short term is maybe a little bit of the easier part, because as Kathy knows, the data that we're getting for this climate change is pretty much brand new. And I mean, design and floodplain data is based on 40, 50 years of records. And the bad part is we're seeing in the past 5-10 years, these records get blown out of the water. I mean, we're seeing flood events that we've never seen in the whole time that we've been recording flood data. So being nimble and being able to adjust to this new data is really something that's our biggest future concern right now. And the city is currently, from like the engineering side, looking at what those storm events should be, and should they be updated, and how can we update them quicker. And then also from a community-wide standpoint, the climate action plan that Raleigh's been working on through our Office of Sustainability has been a key piece in that, to kind of see where these problems are going to occur and try to keep people more informed and planning for this climate change over the next 50 years.
Excellent stuff. So, Ben, in and around Raleigh, what are some of the hot spots? Like, if you live in the city of Raleigh, and in your commute from one side of town to the other, or just thinking about your neighborhood and where you live, what should people be looking out for?
So obviously the thing that people most think about anytime I talk about this subject is Crabtree Mall. That whole area, like right around Crabtree Creek, right there, right at the mall. It's our biggest mall, and unfortunately it's right smack dab in the middle of one of our biggest floodplains. So that's obviously a big impact there. And any of the older infrastructure, by that I mean roads that were inside the belt line, Six Forks, Wake Forest Road, places like that, that can really be the ones where where you see them sending news crews and things like that, like once there's a hurricane and things like that. So that's some of our biggest hotspots. But I will say we also have other hotspots throughout town that aren't necessarily associated with large creeks. That just when we get these flashy storms, I mean, that can be an issue too, and people need to be aware that these flashy storms can impact areas that are outside of these major creek systems and things like that, like a Crabtree Creek or a Walnut Creek. So that's the other safety aspect too. Like if you see any sort of roadway that's flooded or any trail that's flooded, don't go through that flooded water. I mean, it might be the easiest way to go, but it's not going to be worth it because it's never a good idea to kind of go through there.
What's that they say? Turn around, don't drown.
Yep. Turn around, don't drown.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
State government really like to make things rhyme too.
That's right.
It really sticks in the. I remembered it.
Yeah.
So it really sticks in the brain. So because of some of the technical challenges that our stream is facing, we're probably going to be re-uploading this as a video after the fact, which means I don't have any audience questions unless the audience can let me know in the chat that it's actually working fine. It looks like we're running into some stuff. We've got the conversation as far as we can tell. It's just gonna have to go up later. So Ben, Kathy, how do the two agencies communicate, share, and use resources that each one of you have available in order to, plan for the future, and also help people stay safe in the now? Ben, do you want to start?
Yeah. Oh, no.
Or Kathy, go ahead, Kathy.
I was like, I will start.
Kathy's got it.
We love working with the city of Raleigh, and I'm a downtown Raleigh resident, so there's also a very personal angle to this. So thank you for your work, Ben. But we recently completed an urban heat mapping campaign in Raleigh and Durham, and we worked closely with the city's sustainability office on that. And we should be getting the data in the next few months. And that'll help us identify literal hotspots that may overlap with some of these places that flood. So compounding hazards that we'll have to deal with in Raleigh. But for me, it's where the rubber meets the road. Raleigh is growing rapidly. I'm one of the people who moved here from the West Coast in the past 2 years. And we have this chance to radically reimagine our city. We have this big opportunity with more people moving in and all these challenges that we're facing to think about things differently and not just focus on how we did things in the past 40 or 50 years. And I'm finding Raleigh to be really proactive in that manner of thinking. And it's been really encouraging. So we trade data, but really I can't make policy happen. I'm just a scientist at NC State University. The folks on city council, the folks who work in management in the city of Raleigh, all the folks who are working for the city can actually make these things happen and implement them. So yeah, I think there's a lot of back and forth conversation.
Oh yeah, the data that Kathy's office and other offices like hers throughout North Carolina are producing is invaluable, and that's exactly what we need, because as Kathy says, we're doing the more boots on the ground kind of policy making, and we need that data to kind of back up that policy making, either big P or little p, and just kind of going through to kind of make smart fact-based decisions on kind of what we should be doing, and not just basically going as like the wind blows, which as a hurricane talk, that seems like a bad one to make, but yeah, I mean, getting that data is the best thing that we can get, and working with NC State, just kind of use that data and actually base our decisions on it. That's what we need to be doing.
Kathy, you brought up an interesting point. You live in downtown Raleigh, so you've actually got a pretty interesting perspective, I think, on maybe this entire issue. Like, you live in the city, you see the news reports of a hurricane making its way towards North Carolina. What part of your brain, you must be like, I don't know, your brain says, oh, climate change is going to make this into a big, giant, scary storm that could hit Raleigh. Also, I should probably be paying attention to what's coming out of, Ben's office in order to stay safe and from flooding. Am I on the right track here and like speculating about what must be going through your head in a situation like that?
Yeah, there's a lot going through my head at all times. And almost working on climate change, it becomes a coping mechanism to take the AirPods off after an event like this and just compartmentalize what I just said to you, the talking points I use over and over, and move on to the next thing. But a few things have happened in the past few months where it's impossible to do that. The latest IPCC report that this is a code red for humanity. We don't have another IPCC report in us. We need to act now. The events around the US that I referenced earlier, seeing places that I once spent a lot of time in and loved exploring and hold very near and dear, burn to the ground or suffer with intense extreme heat. That was incredibly difficult. And then the city that I live in, seeing some of the challenges that Raleigh faces. So yes, I see some of that flash flooding when we get those big storm events. I get the flash flood warning on my phone. And truly, this is a little bit more lighthearted, but I know I can't go to the mall that day. I don't go to the mall that often, but that's truly the first thing I think about is don't go to Crabtree Mall. So I am making all these connections, but at the same time, I can't think about climate change all the time. It's really, really difficult. It's really taxing. But like I said, the line has been blurring from where I was able to compartmentalize and move on to this is a part of my life. It's going to be a part of my niece's life. And there's really, like I said, no running from it.
And Ben, I can only imagine as a floodplain administrator, if you're driving around the city, even living daily life and then seeing a ditch or a creek in rain and seeing the water levels come up, what that must bring top of mind for you.
Yeah, it's just, like I said, it's I've worked at the city long enough to see where we were actually going out and looking at these creeks during like storm events, to now I can actually bring up a interface on my computer to look at the cameras we have to kind of see what's going on. And just each time it's always thinking about like safety, and I hope people are staying safe, and I hope they know about this, and then kind of what can we do to plan to keep them more safe or to keep them protected with our future plans, because we are dealing with an unprecedented level of events like Kathy alluded to, and it's just it keeps you up at night, for lack of a better term. And we always say that because that's usually when hurricanes hit, is at night, but that's but issues like that can really just really, that's our top priority, to make sure that everybody's staying informed and as safe as possible in whatever ways that's being done. And we've been trying to experiment with different ways to keep people more informed. Chris, the museum has been a great partner the past few years, and even through like the pandemic, to kind of help us kind of do these info sessions like every year about this time, because this is always my hot zone for hurricanes that I always say, this August, September timeframe. And so I really appreciate stuff like that, but just getting out through other kind of social media and even mailings and things like that, just to kind of get that educational piece out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the museum's right smack dab in the city of Raleigh, so the partnership works out really great, and especially since, right, for us here at the museum, and I will unfortunately maybe speak on behalf of the whole place, they let me do that, is that we're concerned with taking current science and the best knowledge about our natural world and sharing that with as many people as we can. And because of our position here in the state, I think we've got a great platform to talk about what's happening in North Carolina, why it matters to people's lives, at the same time as putting the information out there, right? And being such a large museum and maybe trusted in a way by the community here, being able to work with the climate office and Raleigh Stormwater and work with the city, brings all of these elements together where we can talk about the science and we can talk about how it impacts people's lives today, and share information in a way that so many other maybe organizations or institutions or individuals aren't able to do. right? Like the three of us here together make like one really powerful, trusted voice on issues that matter to people's lives. And we can bring the science, we can talk about, how cool hurricanes are, and also, help people prepare for them and stay safe. So, of course, I owe both of you a debt of gratitude for participating in this with us as well. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to check our chats real quick, and we'll probably cut this part out of the video later, since we seem to have, I'm not really sure where we stand on the tech. But anyway, all in all, Ben, is there anything that I failed to ask you that people need to know about?
I think we covered a lot. Like I said, go to our website, raleighNC.gov, search for floods, and all the information will come up. I heard this morning we've got a new way to kind of track where places in Raleigh are flooding through that page, which is very exciting, something through GIS that we haven't been able to do before now, where you can actually click in real time and see like where there's flooding impacts or potential for flooding impacts coming up, like with these storms, like during these larger events and things like that. And just the other educational pieces